Hey guys, I'm Archie, and in this video we're going to be setting up our SDL window. In the previous video, all we did was set up SDL by installing the library and linking everything together. But in this video we're actually going to make our window, which is a little bit more interesting. So, as you can see, I started out by deleting everything in main. We had this, we could delete this. Just make sure you don't delete return 0. That's like part of the SDL's main function. It has to be inside there. You also have to remember that SDL is written in C. And in C, you have to have return 0 for it to work. It's not really a C++ thing, but it is in C. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a class for our window. Go ahead and right-click on Header Files, click Add, New Item, and click Header File, and write window.h. You could right-click on your project and then add a whole entire class, but I don't like doing that because it formats it on its own and adds stuff that I don't want, so I just do it manually. So now that we have the window header file, we can write pragma once on top to prevent any problems from happening when including this file. Then we can make our class. So I'll call it class window. So inside our class window, let's go ahead and make a constructor. And this constructor is going to take in three things: the title of our window, the width, and the height of the window. So first let's include a string. And for the first parameter, let's write const std string reference title. When you pass in parameters, it's good to take in classes as a const reference and primitive types like int as just a regular parameter. Like right now, I'll write int width. You don't need to take that as a const reference. And also int height for the window height. You can end that off. Let's also make a destructor. Alright, good. Then, let's just make our variables that we're going to need. So obviously we're going to need a title, width, and height. So let's make those. I like to prefix member variables with an underscore. Some people like to do m underscore, title like that. I'll just do title. And then int width and int height. And I could put both these in the same line, but I don't know why I like it like this for some reason. Next, we'll need a variable to keep track of whether our window is closed or not. So we'll call it bool closed, and we'll initialize it to false. And we can also initialize these to like 800 by 600, and it's okay if we don't initialize the title. So now that we have all of this, let's make a source file for this. So I click on source files, click add, click new item, click CPP, source file, and we'll also call it window. Alright, I quickly just fixed this to make this window lowercase, so now both of these are lowercase. So we could just go ahead and include our window header file, window.h, and we can complete the constructor. So let's just copy this. Make sure you don't forget to put the scope resolution operator before it, window : the window constructor. And let's go ahead and we'll put a colon here, and we will initialize all the variables here. So underscore title, our member, is equal to title, and width is initialized to the width passed in, and height is initialized to the height passed in. So that's our constructor so far. For our destructor, we're not going to put anything in there yet, so we'll just make it window. I don't know why it corrected me there. Okay, so let's go back into window.h, and we have everything implemented so far. But to make an actual window, we're actually going to need to use SDL, which we haven't done yet. So let's just go ahead and write include SDL.h. And first we're going to make a private initialization method. So, and it's going to return a bool, whether it's successfully initialized or not. So I'll say bool init. And we're also going to need an SDL window. So down here we're going to make an SDL window pointer window, has to be a pointer. And I'll set it equal to null PTR by default. If you're not familiar with null PTR, it's basically if you want to set a pointer equal to nothing, it's better to use null PTR than 0. It's also better than using null. It's a C++ keyword that you should use to initialize pointers to null. So now let's implement the init function. So just copy it, go into the source file, put the window in here. And the first thing we're going to do is initialize SDL. This is similar to what we did in the first video. So we're going to say if SDL underscore init, and we're not going to init everything like we did in the first video, because we're not going to be using anything besides just display or graphics, I guess. To just do that, we're going to write SDL underscore init video. So and again, in the previous video we wrote everything, but that does too much. All we want is just the video portion, because we're not like doing audio or anything. So we're going to say if SDL init video does not equal 0. If SDL init returns 0, that means it was successful. So we're saying if it was not successful. And we could obviously get rid of this does not equal 0 to make to like this. But I think it makes more sense if we put does not equal 0. So if SDL basically did not init, first let's include IOStream. We'll say std error failed to initialize SDL. We're also going to return 0 for our init function, which means it failed. Next we're going to make our window. So we're going to say window underscore window, the member variable we made, equals SDL create window. The first parameter is the title of the window, which we have. It's underscore title. And remember, this is a C library, so the parameter is a const char, not an std string. But just to convert it, all we have to do is just write dot C underscore str. And this returns a C string. The next parameter is the position of the screen. I want the position of the screen to be centered, so I'm going to write SDL window pos centered, window position centered. That's for the X. For the Y, I also want the Y to be centered. Then it asks for the width and the height of the screen, which we have that information. It's our member width and height. And it also asks for any flags we want in the end. If you're not familiar with what flags are, essentially what flags are basically different options that you want to apply. An example of an option we might want to apply in this function, SDL create window, is maybe to tell it that we want the window to be resizable. So we would write SDL window resizable. That's a flag that we could use. There are various flags that you might want to put inside here, but for now we don't want any flags, so we could just put 0. I don't really want it to be resizable quite yet. So now we just created the window. We're going to want to check if the window actually created successfully. So we're going to say if window equals null pointer. So if our window is still nothing, that means it didn't create successfully. So I'll write std C error failed to create window, and then return 0. If you're not familiar with std error, it basically does what cout does, except you use it when you want to write an error. So this is about everything I wanted to check so far, and we're just going to go ahead and return true for our init function. Again, if something fails, it's going to return 0 and just exit the function, but if it gets to this point, then we're going to return successful, true. So let's go ahead and go inside our constructor, and let's write if, and we're going to put an exclamation point for if it didn't init, so if not init. So what it's going to do is just going to call the init function right here. It's going to look at what it returns. If it returns 0, so if it returns 0, then we're going to say closed equals true. And then our program is going to exit. Because obviously if nothing initialized correctly, then we want the window to be closed. So now in our destructor, we actually want to get rid of a couple things. First, we want to get rid of our window in our destructor. So we're going to say SDL destroy window. And just go ahead and pass in the window. We're also going to want to sort of uninitialize SDL, or quit it. So we're going to write SDL underscore quit. It's like the opposite of initializing. So now that we have all of this, we should have a usable window. So let's go inside main. Let's go ahead and, well, we could get rid of these things. We could just include window.h. Now inside here, we can make a window, window, and we can pass in whatever we want. So the title of the window, I'll just write SDL tutorial, and you'll see that show up. For the width and height, I'll say 800 by 600. I'm getting an error here because I didn't set the initial field to public. I completely forgot about that, so just write public right here, and then everything will work fine if you go inside main. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a while loop. It's going to keep going and doing things while our window is open. So it's going to look something like this, while the window is not closed. So while window dot is closed is not true. We don't have an isClosed function quite yet, and let's go ahead and make one. So go into window.h, and in our public field, write bool is closed. And we can mark this const because this is not going to change anything in our class. And all it's going to do is simply return this closed variable. So return closed. And while we're at it, we can actually mark this as inline. In case you're not familiar with inline, basically, instead of making a whole entire function call, it just copies and pastes whatever is inside the function into wherever you call the function. Now if we ever call isClosed, like right here, that's the same thing as just writing closed, like the variable, because we made it inline. Basically, the point of using inline is that it makes little functions very efficient. If you have something like a loop, then there's no point of doing it, but something like this, where it's just one tiny statement, it's good to inline this. Although the compiler is pretty smart, and the compiler will probably add that anyway. Anyhow, now we have this loop that keeps going and doing stuff while the window is not closed. We don't really have anything to do quite yet, but let's just go ahead and run this to see if our window opens. And indeed it does. We have this window that's called SDL tutorial, as I mentioned, and it's 800 by 600. As you could tell, it's like a 4:3 aspect ratio. But it's not really working right now because we have to add some more to it, and it's going to start not responding. Now let's just close this. And now let's add more. The next thing we're going to add is actually a function that determines if any event was performed, like your keyboard was clicked or something like that. So we're going to call this void poll events. So when I say poll, I kind of mean detect and then do something with whatever was detected. So let's go into window.cpp and implement it. Don't forget to add a window here. First thing we're going to do is make an SDL event variable. SDL event. You don't need a pointer here, just call it event. And event might light up blue for like a second. I think that's a little bug. That's not an actual keyword in C++ that I'm familiar with. So you could call it event. As you can see, it's white now. And now we're actually going to determine if an event was performed. And if it was, then we're going to do something with that event. So first we're going to write if SDL poll event, then pass in event, the address of the event, because it's looking for a pointer here. See, a SDL event pointer event. So this is saying if an event actually occurred. So if it did, we're actually going to examine the event. So we're going to write switch event.type. So now we're looking at the type of the event. Now for the cases, the first case I'm going to do is if they clicked the X button on the screen. So to do that, you're going to write case, and the X button is actually called SDL quit. Case SDL underscore quit. Not like the quit nor destructor, but like it's like a sort of like a macro, even though no, it's inside an enum. So if they click the X button, then we want to close the window. Perfect. We have a variable called closed. So we're just going to say closed equals true. Then we can break out of this case. And that's all we're going to do for now. We're just going to add default, just break, may as well. And this is enough to pull events. So if they click the X button, great, it's going to exit the window. So now let's test it out. We can go inside main, and inside this loop, we're going to want our window to pull events. Window.pull events. So if we run this, well, actually this might still not work. No, it does work. So it did close. I'll show you that again. So this window is responding now. You can move it around and everything. And if we click this X button, then it closes. Great. So that's about it for this video. We were able to make a window pop up and give it a name and a size, and we're able to close it on the click of the X button. So I think that was my goal for this video, and everything worked out well. In the next video, I think we'll go more into actually drawing stuff to the window, maybe more into polling events, but we'll see. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you next time.